When my son left me at that nursing home, he said it was for my own good. That's what people say when they're trying to make betrayal sound like love. He kissed my forehead, handed my suitcase to a nurse I'd never met, and said, "I'll come visit, Mama." Then he walked out, just like that, as if I were an errand he'd finally crossed off his list. From the window, I watched his car disappear down the driveway. It was raining, and the glass fogged up so fast, I couldn't tell if the water outside was the storm or my eyes refusing to forget. Before we continue, tell me where you're listening from and subscribe for more stories from Grandma Evelyn, because what happened next, child, wasn't punishment. It was the lesson life gives to those who confuse convenience with love. They call me Grandma Evelyn now, but to one person, I was just Mama. Marcus Carter, my only child, my pride, my purpose, and eventually the sharpest lesson the Lord ever gave me. When he was born, I was 30, already half tired from a world that wasn't kind to women who spoke too much truth. His father, Charles, used to say Marcus came into this world with his fists clenched and his mouth ready to argue with God, and he was right. Marcus didn't cry when the doctor smacked him that first time. He just stared, big, stubborn eyes, like he'd already decided life owed him something. He was a good boy, though, smart, quick. He used to sit at the kitchen table doing math puzzles while I graded papers for my students. "I'm gonna buy you a big house one day, Mama," he'd say, counting on his fingers. And I'd smile, knowing he believed it. That house never came, but I didn't mind. We made a home out of what we had: a creaky porch, 2 mismatched mugs, and a lemon-scented candle that burned every Sunday morning while I cooked grits and eggs. He'd hum gospel songs between bites, and I used to think, this is what joy sounds like. Then life started tugging at him. City life, money, pride. He left for Atlanta at 20, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big and a heart that didn't have much room for home anymore. Calls turned into texts, texts into silence. When I visited once, he said, "Mama, you don't need to work anymore. I'll take care of you soon." I laughed and said, "Baby, don't promise me soon. Just promise me someday." But someday never came either. After Charles passed, I could feel the distance stretch even wider. Marcus sent flowers to the funeral, couldn't make the trip. "Work," he said, "always work." But grief doesn't clock out, child. It sits beside you at the table, eats your food, and stares at the empty chair. The first time he mentioned the nursing home was over breakfast. He'd driven down, wearing that city polish that looked too tight on him. "Mama, it's just until you get stronger," he said, buttering toast without looking at me. "You'll have people to help you, meals, medicine, all on schedule." "Schedule," I repeated. "Sounds like a nice word for cage." He sighed. "Don't start, Mama." That was the thing about Marcus. He mistook comfort for care, order for love. He wanted to fix everything that made him uncomfortable, including me. A few weeks later, I woke to the sound of him packing my clothes. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling between sleep and disbelief. "You'll thank me later," he said. "I'd rather thank you now by staying home." But my no didn't fit into his plan. He smiled the way people do when they've already decided what's best for you. And by the end of that week, I was sitting in a strange lobby with vinyl floors and smiling nurses who called me sweetheart. I remember that morning like a photograph. His hand on the doorknob, sunlight slicing through the blinds, his silhouette fading into the bright. He said, "I'll come by tomorrow, Mama." Tomorrow turned into months. And me? I learned to stop checking the clock because time only hurts when you expect someone to show up. They say the worst kind of betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the ones who hug you before they push you away. The day Marcus dropped me off, the sun was too bright. You ever notice how betrayal always hides behind good weather? The kind of day that makes you think nothing bad could possibly happen. The nursing home looked new. White walls, trimmed hedges, a little fountain out front with fake lilies. It tried too hard to look peaceful. Marcus parked by the entrance, cut the engine, and sat there in silence. For a moment, I thought maybe he changed his mind. But then he said it. Those 5 words that still echo in my head like a hymn sung wrong. It's for your own good. He smiled, the nervous smile people wear when they're lying to themselves. Then he got out, came around, and opened my door like a gentleman escorting guilt. Come on, Mama, let's get you settled. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and mashed potatoes. A nurse behind the counter smiled too wide. "Welcome, Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice sugar-coated and hollow. "We'll take good care of you." Her badge said Lydia Jenkins. I'd learn her name later by heart. Marcus handed her a folder of paperwork. I caught my name on the top line, typed neatly, sterile, final. "Your son tells us you're still very independent," Lydia said kindly. "I used to be," I replied. She paused, maybe catching something in my tone. "We'll make sure you feel at home here." I wanted to laugh. At home? That's what people say when they want to make captivity sound polite. Marcus followed me to the room. There were 2 twin beds, one already occupied by a sleeping woman whose breathing rattled like an old fan. On the other bed sat a plastic tray with a pitcher of water and a single glass. The walls were beige, the kind of color that tries not to be noticed. "This isn't so bad," Marcus said, trying to sound cheerful. "I've seen prisons with more personality," I muttered. He laughed a little, awkwardly. "Mama, please, don't start." I looked at him then, really looked. He was tired. The city had carved lines into his face that even money couldn't smooth out. His hands, once small enough to fit in mine, now looked restless, twitching at his sides. "You could have asked me what I wanted," I said quietly. "I'm asking now," he said. "It's too late now." He looked away. "I'll come by tomorrow." "Don't," I said. "What?" "Don't make promises you don't plan to keep." He swallowed hard, kissed my forehead, and left. The door clicked shut behind him. And just like that, I was someone else's responsibility. That first night, I didn't unpack. The suitcase sat by the bed like a stubborn witness. The woman in the next bed coughed in her sleep. Somewhere down the hall, a TV played a game show, laughter echoing through thin walls. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the lemon tree back home. Who would water it now? Would it miss me? Silly thoughts, maybe, but when everything you own becomes a memory, even trees start to feel like family. The nurse, Lydia, peeked in around midnight. "You need anything, sweetheart?" "No, thank you," I said, just trying to remember what peace used to feel like. She smiled gently. "You'll find it again." I didn't have the heart to tell her peace wasn't lost, it had been stolen. Days bled into weeks. The world outside went on spinning, birthdays, holidays, headlines. Inside, time had no edges. Breakfast at 7, medication at 9, physical therapy at 10. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The clock ticked, but nothing moved. I tried to write Marcus a letter once. Dear Marcus, I wrote, you did what you thought was best. I hope the city loves you back the way I loved you. Then I tore it up. Some things don't deserve the grace of words. One afternoon, a volunteer came by with a basket of flowers. From your son, she said brightly. He said to tell you he's busy but thinking of you. I smiled and took the flowers. Tulips, beautiful, fragile things. They died 2 days later. That evening, Lydia sat with me by the window. You have family that visits? She asked. Not anymore, I said. She looked at me with those soft eyes that nurses get when they see the truth without asking. You're stronger than you look. I shook my head. Strength ain't a choice, baby. It's what's left when love runs out. One night, months later, I heard a voice in the hallway, a new resident shouting, "My kids said they'd come back for me." No one answered. That's when it hit me. This place wasn't a nursing home. It was a collection of unfinished goodbyes. I lay back, closed my eyes, and whispered to the dark, Lord, if this is where you keep the forgotten, then teach me how to forgive the ones who did the forgetting. The silence didn't answer, but for the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like waiting. And I realized maybe waiting is just faith with patience. There's a rhythm to life in a nursing home, not music, just repetition. The same footsteps down the hall, the same squeak of wheels, the same smell of bleach and oatmeal. Time doesn't pass here. It sits down beside you, folds its hands, and waits to see who'll blink first. Lydia, the nurse, became my lifeline without even trying. She was 50, kind but firm, the sort of woman who knew how to hold silence like a secret. She brought me coffee every morning, strong, black, the way Charles used to make it. You're the only one who still drinks it like this, she said once. Everyone else wants sugar and cream. Sugar spoils the truth, I told her. She laughed, but her eyes softened like she understood. My roommate, Miss Hattie, was 92 and nearly blind, but she remembered every heartbreak she'd ever survived. My boys used to visit, she'd tell me, but they got busy. Then she'd smile, showing gums where teeth used to be. Everybody's busy, baby. That's why I pray slow, gives God time to listen. Every night, I wrote little notes in my notebook, not letters to Marcus, but pieces of myself I didn't want to lose. Day 14. Miss Hattie laughed so hard she cried. I envy her memory. Day 26. Lydia says forgiveness is a muscle. If you don't use it, it forgets how to move. Day 40. I'm still angry, but it's softer now, more like a bruise than a wound. After a few months, I knew everyone's stories. Mr. Delaney, who waited by the window every Friday because his daughter promised to visit next week. Clara, who knitted scarves for people who never sent thank you notes. And Miss Ruth, who played piano in the rec room every evening, her fingers trembling but never missing a note. Sometimes I'd sit beside her while she played. The music reminded me that beauty doesn't disappear with age. It just slows down so you can hear it better. But even in the peace, there were cracks. Like the smell of rain that comes before a storm. One afternoon, I was reading on the porch when Lydia sat beside me, folding her hands in her lap. "You got a call today," she said quietly. "From who?" "Your son." My stomach twisted. What did he want? He didn't say much, just asked how you were, said work's been hard. I nodded, staring at the sky. He still calls it work. That boy's been working at avoiding me for years. Lydia didn't respond. She just let the silence hold me together. That night, I dreamed of Marcus as a little boy again, barefoot, running through the yard shouting, "Catch me, Mama!" I woke up crying, the taste of memory sharp in my mouth. Months passed. My hair turned whiter, my hands thinner, but my mind stayed sharp. I read every newspaper, memorized the staff schedule, and knew who'd sneak extra biscuits from the kitchen. I made peace with the routine. Until the day the new resident arrived. Her name was Beatrice, a woman in her 50s, too young to be there. She was quiet at first, but one evening she asked me, "Do you ever stop waiting for someone?" "No," I said. "You just learn to wait without pain." She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who knows." "I know enough to write a book," I said, "but I'd rather not." We became friends, the kind that don't need small talk. She'd lost her husband to cancer, her son to addiction. Her eyes had the same hollow patience mine did. "You think God ever forgets us?" she asked one night. "Maybe," I said, "but only long enough to see if we remember him." One morning, I found Miss Hattie's bed empty. Her Bible sat open, a bookmark on Psalms 23. Lydia told me she'd passed quietly in her sleep. "She went peaceful," she said. I nodded, tracing the worn pages of that Bible. She always prayed slow. Guess God finally caught up. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt too still, like the building itself was holding its breath. I wrote in my notebook again. Day 173. Miss Hattie's gone. I didn't cry. I think I'm learning how to love without fear. Then I looked at the page and whispered, "That's what motherhood should have taught me." The days blurred again, but I wasn't the same woman who came through those doors months ago. I had stopped counting time by meals and started measuring it by mercy. Still, some nights, I'd sit by the window, watching the parking lot. Every pair of headlights that turned in made my heart twitch. But it was never him, never Marcus. One evening, Lydia sat beside me and handed me a letter. "This came for you," she said. "Looks like his handwriting." I held the envelope like it might bite me. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, like guilt trying to disguise itself as care. Inside was a card with just one line. "Thinking of you, Mama. Hope you're comfortable." Comfortable. That word again. People always want you to be comfortable when they've made you miserable. I tore the card in half and dropped it in the wastebasket. Lydia said nothing, just squeezed my shoulder. A week later, we had a visitor, Pastor Riley, the old preacher from my hometown. He was volunteering that day, reading scripture to whoever would listen. I sat near the back, pretending to read. He looked up mid-sermon and locked eyes with me. "Evelyn Carter," he said, grinning. "You still arguing with the Lord," I said. The room laughed softly. Afterward, he sat with me. "You look good," he said, "wiser even." "Wiser don't always mean happier, Pastor." He nodded. "You ever forgive that boy of yours?" I took a breath. "I've tried. Some days I succeed. Some days I start over." "That's all forgiveness is," he said, "a daily chore." I smiled faintly. "Then I'm still sweeping." That night, as I turned off the light, I realized something. Marcus hadn't just left me in that place. He'd left himself, too. And maybe, just maybe, we were both waiting for the day one of us would find the other again. So I prayed, not for him to come back, but for me to be ready if he ever did. It was a Tuesday, always is for bad news. Tuesdays carry the kind of silence that doesn't warn you first. Lydia found me in the courtyard where I was watering the half-dead marigolds by the fence. "You've got a visitor," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Family?" She nodded. "He said his name is Marcus." The world tilted just a little. For a second, I thought I might faint, but pride held me upright. "Tell him I'm not available," I said. Lydia smiled that knowing smile of hers. You sure, Evelyn? He looks like a man who's already been turned away from too many doors. That line hit harder than I wanted to admit. I sighed, wiped my hands on my apron, and followed her back inside. He was sitting in the visitor's lounge, hunched over, elbows on his knees. His once perfect suit looked wrinkled, his tie loose, his shoes scuffed. That city shine was gone. What was left was just my son. When he saw me, he stood too fast. "Mama." I didn't move closer. "You remember who I am now?" He winced. "Please don't start like that." I raised an eyebrow. "Then how should I start, Marcus? Welcome back? Sorry the nursing home didn't have a room big enough for your ego?" He sat down again, shoulders slumping. "I deserve that." I stayed standing. "You deserve worse." He nodded, quiet. Then, after a long pause, he said, "I messed up." "I know," I said simply. He blinked. "Just like that? No questions?" I don't need to ask a fool why he tripped when I saw him running blind. He let out a short, broken laugh. "That's fair." He told me everything. How the company he worked for folded after a bad investment. How he'd taken loans to cover debts. How his wife left when the money did. How, when there was nowhere else to go, he came back to the only person who'd ever loved him without condition, me. When he finished, he leaned forward. "Mama, I need help." There it was, the real reason. "What kind of help?" I asked. He hesitated. "The kind that keeps me from losing everything." I tilted my head. "Didn't you already lose everything when you left me here?" He flinched. "Please don't do this." "I'm not doing anything, Marcus. You are." "I know I was wrong," he said, his voice cracking, "but I'm trying to make things right. I just need something to start over." I looked at him, the same boy who once cried when his kite got stuck in the lemon tree, who promised me the world, who grew into a man who thought love could be postponed. "Do you know what it cost me, what you did?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "Everything." "No," I said, "it cost me trust, and that's more expensive than everything." He looked at me like a man waiting for mercy, but too ashamed to ask. "Sit down," I said, finally taking the chair opposite him. "Let's talk like people, not ghosts." He did. We sat there for a long time, words slow and careful. He told me he'd been living in his car for a month, that he tried praying but couldn't find the words, that he came here because deep down he still believed I'd help him, even after everything. "Why?" I asked. "Because you're my mother," he said, as if that word still meant what it used to. I nodded slowly. "And what do mothers do, Marcus?" They forgive." I leaned back, folded my hands in my lap. "No, son, mothers teach. Forgiveness is the lesson, not the rule." He swallowed hard. "Then teach me." That was the first honest thing I'd heard him say in years. That night, I sat in my room, the moonlight cutting silver lines across the floor. I thought about every sleepless night I'd spent praying he'd walk back through that door, and now that he had, I didn't know what to do with the ache. Lydia knocked softly. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm thinking." She sat on the edge of my bed. "About him? About what love looks like when it's tired." She smiled sadly. "Love doesn't get tired, Evelyn. It just changes its shape." That stayed with me long after she left. The next morning, I told Marcus to meet me in the garden. He showed up early, eyes red but sober, hands trembling slightly. "You want my help?" I said. "You'll earn it." He frowned. "How?" "There's a leaky roof over the chapel here. You'll fix it." He looked confused. You want me to work here? That's right, I said. Every nail you hammer, every shingle you replace, you'll remember what it feels like to build something instead of taking it. He blinked back tears. And if I do it? I shrugged. Then maybe I'll remind the bank you're a man worth helping. He laughed through the tears. You always were the toughest teacher. Someone had to be. As he walked toward the chapel with a ladder on his shoulder, I whispered to myself, sometimes the Lord doesn't send storms to drown you. He sends them to wash the foolish off your face. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace that wasn't born from revenge, but from purpose. The first morning Marcus climbed the ladder to the chapel roof, the sky was thin and pale, like a paper held up to sunlight. He moved awkwardly at first, hands that used to type memos at a desk fumbling with hammer and nails, but there was a set to him that I hadn't seen in years. Each strike he made sounded hollow and then true, like a confession that finally had weight. Word spread fast through the home. The aides peeked through the windows. Residents clustered along the hallways, curious at the sight of a man who once carried himself everywhere with sharp shoulders, now carrying a pail of shingles. "Look at him go," Miss Ruth said, her voice a low hymn. "God's a funny fellow. He uses what breaks us to fix what matters." Marcus worked under the watchful eyes of Lydia and a couple of maintenance men. He climbed, hammered, measured, cursed under his breath when a nail bent, wiped sweat from his brow, and kept going. When he dropped a board, he flinched like a child and apologized to it. After an hour, he sat down on the chapel steps, hands black with tar. He didn't look up at me. "It's harder than I thought," he said finally, voice small. "You doing honest work for the first time in a while tends to feel that way," I replied. My voice was gentle but steady. "It tends to take the shine off excuses." He swallowed and stared at his shoes. "Mama, I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix everything. I thought money could." He laughed, a sound that tasted bitter on his tongue. "Turns out money only buys you a roof if you already have a heart." The chapel's old clock ticked behind him, each second like an eyelid closing and opening. We sat like that for a while, two bodies warming in the thin sun. Days became weeks of sweat and small reconciliations. Marcus showed up every morning. Sometimes his sleeves rolled, sometimes he came with bruises on his hands from working too hard or from not knowing exactly how to hammer. He learned to mix mortar, to splice a beam, to patch a leak. He learned to call Lydia when he got stuck instead of snapping at the first person in sight. He learned to listen. The residents started to call him the handyman with a mix of affection and astonishment. He'd bring little repairs for people, a loose button sewn back onto a cardigan, a squeaky walker greased. He would sit and listen to a story about a lost love, and sometimes he would share one of his own without being asked. There was something about the humbleness of manual labor that stripped some of his arrogance away and revealed a tired, scared man beneath. One afternoon, we had a small ceremony in the chapel. The kids from the volunteer program came with cookies, and the pastor blessed the new patched roof. Marcus stood in the back, shirt stained with tar, looking as if he didn't belong anywhere but there. Lydia handed him a bottle of water, and he accepted it like someone being offered a truce. "Thank you," he said to me later, voice thick, "for making me do this, for not kicking me to the curb." I looked at him, thinking of the tiny boy who used to count change before bed, thinking of all the promises he once made and then traded for easier things. "I didn't make you do anything," I said. "I offered you the chance to remember how to build. You took it. That's on you." He looked down, meeting my eyes with a kind of hunger I hadn't noticed before, not for money, but for approval. "I want to be worth something again," he murmured. "Then be," I said simply. "Worth is more than a bank statement." There was a test, though, because life never let someone off the hook with one last honest hurt. A week after the ceremony, the nursing home held a fundraiser BBQ. Staff and families came, music played, plates of food clattered. Marcus, thinking he could show he'd changed, volunteered to carve the roasted ham. He moved through the crowd like a man trying on a suit that didn't yet fit. Halfway through the event, a dispute erupted at one of the tables. Two daughters argued over visitation schedules. Marcus, who'd learned the art of stepping in, tried to calm one of the women, but she turned on him. "You think you're so noble now?" she snapped. "You left your mother at this place, and you come here with your hands full of charity? Don't pretend." Her words were a match, and for a moment, the wind held. Marcus stepped back, eyes wide. I watched him stand there, the room waiting to see if the new man would flinch back into the old skin. He didn't. He exhaled, walked to the table, knelt, and apologized to the woman, not with excuses, but with the weary humility of someone who knows he's been a coward. "You're right," he said. "I left. I'm sorry." The woman, surprised, looked at him with something like softness that had been absent earlier. That night, after the crowd had gone and the dishes were cleared, Marcus sat across from me with a plate of leftovers. "I should have done this sooner," he said. "I thought I had to prove something to the world. Now I see it's about proving something to myself." "You weren't the first man to mistake success for love," I told him. "The trick is learning which one you're actually chasing." He laughed, a small, honest sound, and then his expression folded into a sadness I recognized. "Will you ever trust me again?" I took his hand, calloused from work, warm. "Trust is a slow-growing thing. It'll have its seasons, but I can see you're planting." He nodded, tears running unnoticed down his face. "I want to make it right." He wiped his cheeks with the back of his hand. "Where do I start?" "Start by doing," I said. "Fix what you broke with your hands and your time. Sit with the ones you ignored. Listen to the stories you used to think were boring, and stop pretending the world owes you more than it does." He listened like a student, and for the first time, I saw the old boy inside the man, the one who once wanted to buy a big house for his mother, coming back to life, but this time without the reckless hurry. He was learning to value each small, steady thing: a corrected shingle, a mended fence, a laugh coaxed from a neighbor. The true climax didn't come with a single dramatic moment. It came in the small, almost unnoticeable ways. The way Marcus would hum along with Miss Ruth's piano until he didn't look like an intruder. The way he'd stay afterward to fold chairs. The way he'd check on the men with tremors long after the social hour ended. He started volunteering to drive residents to appointments, sitting in the waiting room holding hands until the appointment was over. One day, he organized a small memorial for Miss Hattie, arranging flowers, inviting people, and standing quietly as the pastor said a prayer. He did this without fanfare. He did it because someone should. Then came the night that proved it to me beyond the legal papers and the courtroom declarations. An elderly man had fallen in the back garden. It would have been easy for anyone to avert their eyes, to pretend they didn't see the mess of limbs. Marcus was there first. He lifted the man with a steadiness that wasn't muscle alone. It was a new tenderness. He stayed until the ambulance came, held the hand of a stranger like he had finally learned how to keep a promise. When the man opened his eyes and blinked at Marcus, the old man murmured, "Thank you, son." Marcus looked at him as if he had been given a second name. I watched from the window, the lemon tree throwing a shadow across my lap, and felt something settle inside my chest. Not joy, not yet, but a quiet relief that the man who had left me could still find the nerve to return. That night, Marcus sat on the porch steps with his head in his hands. "I don't deserve this, Mama," he said. I took the blanket off my knee and draped it over his shoulders. "Deservings is a town people don't get to live in. We live in repair." He looked at me and for the first time asked plainly, "Will you let me be repaired?" I held his gaze. "I'm not the one who mends men for good," I said, "but I can give you the work you need to fix yourself." He nodded, and together we sat in the dark and did the quiet work of being honest with one another. The days after that night moved gently, like pages turning themselves. Marcus still came every morning to the nursing home, not because I told him to, but because he wanted to. He fixed squeaky doors, watered the marigolds, carried trays for folks whose hands shook too much to trust their grip. Lydia started teasing him, calling him Mr. Maintenance. He'd just grin and shake his head, a man learning how to smile without pretending. The other residents adored him. Even Miss Ruth, who once said she didn't trust a man in a tie, admitted he'd finally earned himself a place in the Lord's patience. Every time I saw him working, I thought of how pride can be stripped down until all that's left is decency. There's something holy in that, I think, watching a person remember their own goodness. One afternoon, as the sun slid low and golden across the courtyard, Marcus came to me with an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. He handed it to me, his hands rough and trembling. "It's the paperwork for the house, Mama, the deed. I sold the condo in Atlanta, paid off the debts. What's left, it's yours. It always should have been." I looked at him for a long time. "I never wanted your money, Marcus." He shook his head. "I know, but I needed to do something that meant more than words." I took the envelope, felt the weight of it, not from the papers, but from the meaning. "Son, the world doesn't balance its books with guilt," I said softly. "You can't buy redemption. You earn it with how you live the next chapter." He nodded, eyes damp. "Then let me live it here for a while. Let me make myself useful." "Useful is easy," I said. "Honest, that's harder, but you're getting there." For the first time in years, we started having breakfast together, just like old times, black coffee, scrambled eggs, quiet conversation. Sometimes we'd sit in the garden and he'd read the newspaper out loud because my eyes weren't what they used to be. Other times we just sat without talking, sharing the kind of silence that doesn't feel like distance anymore. One morning, Marcus said, "You know, Mama, I used to think strength was never needing help." "And now?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Now I think strength is showing up after you've messed up." "That's a better definition," I said. "Write that down somewhere before you forget it." He laughed, and for a second I heard the boy he used to be, the one who hummed gospel songs between bites of breakfast before the world got too loud to listen. Weeks turned into months. Marcus found a small apartment nearby. He volunteered at the home 3 times a week, then started helping the local church with their outreach program. Pastor Riley told me once, "That boy's got a servant's heart now. Took a while for it to beat right, but it's steady." I just smiled. He's his father's son again. When I finally visited my old house, the one he'd nearly lost years ago, it was empty but clean, sunlight spilling across the floors like forgiveness. Marcus had fixed everything, the leaky faucet, the peeling paint, even the porch light that hadn't worked in a decade. He handed me the keys. "You want to move back, Mama?" I looked around, breathing in the scent of old cedar and lemon polish. "No," I said. "This house had its time. Let someone else fill it with noise and hope." He smiled. "You always said home isn't a place." "It isn't," I said. "It's the person you refuse to give up on." A few weeks later, the nursing home held a small dedication ceremony for the repaired chapel. The roof Marcus had mended glowed silver under the morning light. He stood at the back, head bowed, while Pastor Riley prayed. "Lord, teach us that mercy ain't weakness, and that love, even the tired kind, still builds what pride once broke." After the service, Marcus walked over to me, eyes glistening. "I wish Daddy could see this," he whispered. "He does," I said. "He's probably up there shaking his head, saying, 'Took that boy long enough.'" We laughed, and for the first time, it didn't hurt to remember. That evening, Marcus drove me back to the home. He walked me to the door like a gentleman, then hesitated. "Mama, thank you for not turning me away." I reached up and touched his cheek. "You can't turn away what still belongs to your heart," I said. He nodded, eyes shining. "You forgive me then?" I smiled. "Forgiveness isn't a door, baby. It's a hallway. You walk it every day." He hugged me, and I let him, the kind of hug that stretches across years of silence and still fits. When he finally left, I sat by the window, watching his taillights fade down the road, the same road he'd driven years ago when he left me behind. But this time, he wasn't driving away. He was driving home. It's funny how life circles back, child. You walk long enough, and the same road that once broke your heart brings you back carrying peace. That's what it feels like now. Peace, the kind that doesn't come from fixing everything, but from finally letting it rest. The days here pass slow and kind. Mornings smell like coffee again. Lydia hums while she works. Marcus visits every Sunday. He doesn't bring gifts anymore, just himself, and that's more than I ever wanted. He sits by the window while I crochet or read. Sometimes we don't even talk. We just exist in the same quiet, like two notes that finally found harmony after years of discord. He tells me about his volunteer work, the men he helps, the broken families he listens to. He says, "Mama, every time I see someone abandoned, I think of you." I smile. "Then maybe I was left here for a reason." He frowns. "You don't really believe God planned it that way, do you?" "Maybe," I say softly. "Or maybe he just knew you wouldn't listen until silence taught you better than I could." He laughs at that, shaking his head, but I see it, that shimmer of understanding behind his eyes. Sometimes I still dream of that first day, the glass between us, the rain, the ache that felt too big to ever fade. But dreams don't hurt the same way once you've outgrown the pain. They just remind you that you survived it. Forgiveness doesn't erase what was done. It just removes the poison from the wound. And when you stop bleeding, you start breathing again. This morning, Marcus brought me a small clock. Nothing fancy. Wooden frame, brass hands. "It's not new," he said, setting it on the nightstand, "but it ticks steady." I ran my fingers over it. "You know what I like about old clocks?" He raised an eyebrow. "What?" "They keep time even when nobody's watching." He smiled, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be, the one who believed love could fix anything. Maybe he wasn't wrong. Maybe it just took him a lifetime to learn what love actually looks like. When the sun starts to set, I like to walk out to the garden, slow, steady, cane tapping against the bricks. The marigolds are blooming again. Marcus planted them this spring. "They're stubborn flowers," he said. "Guess that's why they suit you." The air smells of earth and rain. I sit on the bench near the lemon tree and let the world hush around me. The wind carries laughter from inside, Lydia scolding someone for stealing extra pudding cups. I close my eyes, and in the stillness, I hear it. Charles's voice, soft and sure, whispering from some distant corner of memory. "You did good, Evie. You kept the home alive." I whisper back, "It's not the walls anymore, Charles. It's the people." Because that's the truth I've learned. Home isn't something you own, it's something you give. And forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the door that lets love walk back in without shame. Before the day ends, I write one last line in my notebook, the same notebook that carried all my anger, my grief, my waiting. He left me once, I forgave him twice, and somewhere in between, we both came home. Then I close it, place it beside the clock, and smile. The lemon tree sways outside my window, golden light dripping through its leaves. I take a sip of my tea, still black, still strong, and breathe. Because after all that's been said and done, child, I don't need revenge or apology or even time. I have peace. And peace, once it finds you, doesn't need to be chased again.